mean, when it comes to that, so a lot of you ask me like how to analyze deals and stuff, and I don't have a finance degree. I barely can run Excel. Those who work with me know that anything I get, I analyze almost everything on a yellow piece of paper. I keep most of them. I've got stacks and stacks of these and all the genius ideas I have trying to figure out how to do a deal. And once I convince myself there's a deal, I find somebody like Dave or somebody that can run that spreadsheet to actually show it so I can articulate it to an underwriter or investor that it's a deal. So what I thought today is we'll answer questions. Dave's right. I mean, between the two of us and his experience on the retail and a little bit more on the investment side is a little bit more analytics required as far as looking at deals at cap rates and returns and some of those things. So I think he would be a good asset to help you answer any questions like that. And I think one of my strengths is sort of the art of a deal, like how do you sniff out a deal? Is it really a deal or not? Because I do a lot of this as a gut feel that I use if I like it, and then I try to convince myself why or why not to do it. And again, you wouldn't rely on gut feel, but I'm relying on gut feel and 25 years in real estate and trying deals and doing good on deals and failing on deals. One of the biggest things I think that for either for your clients or for yourself is how you structure the contract. And always give yourself enough time to get out of it. I mean, some of the deals that I write, the sellers sign, I can't believe they signed. I mean, most of everything, I leave myself an out because some people get so caught up in the analytics that they never make offers. So they're sitting here underwriting and talking about why they're not gonna make a deal or why this thing isn't the perfect deal so often, and they keep passing on deals because it doesn't get perfect for them where they're 100% comfortable. And I would have already put 5 deals under contract and canceled 4 of them by the time you guys are getting your spreadsheet in order. And so I would encourage you to take some activity. Don't be afraid to make those offers. As you know, representing clients, you can always get out of a contract. Write something up to get yourself some time, some due diligence to really dig in and find out, verify what the income is, what kind of rate you can get on your mortgage, and all those things. So mostly on the analysis part, you're trying to do an upfront blush to say, is this fitting in a parameter for either myself or my clients? Can I convince myself that it's worth at least spending my time to write a contract and negotiate and see if I can do it? The thing is, don't get caught up in getting a deal. I mean, if you have to write, I mean, Brooke knows this, I write offers, I send out offers all the time. And some are just ridiculous. And I just say, if they sign this thing, then I'll get interested and go research this deal. But always be looking at deals and you don't have to pay full price for stuff. There's no obligation to do that. But if you see something you like and you think you'd like it better at 50 grand less, start a conversation with the agent, try to get a little rapport going. Who knows, the deal might be there in 6 months, now you've got a little credibility and you have a chance to go with that. So, does that make sense? They're all looking at me like, what is he talking about? Are we on the right page here? Okay. So my hope was that you guys had some questions, specific questions about investing or analyzing deals or just building wealth. So I'll open the forum up for that. Dave and I are here to answer those, try to get a discussion. Hopefully you guys can stay engaged. Don't be a microphone hogging, and if we get way into the weeds on one deal, we may move on to something else. But we just love to see kind of what you're thinking about, what we can help you with. If you have specific deals, we can kind of show you how we would walk through them. And if nobody has stuff, then we'll start talking about deals we know.
Does anybody have a deal that they're kind of working through right now and have questions?
Would you base these same principles on residential investment, like single family home rentals, that sort of thing? Or are we gearing all this more towards commercial, multifamily?
Yes, always residential. My bread and butter is residential.
Sure.
I mean, it's the same as Monopoly, right? You buy a bunch of, is it green ones, the little crappy green ones, and then you turn up into a big red one, something like that. I mean, my base has been, because it's what I've known the most, from being in the residential business, is buying little houses. And I mean, the only reason I'm able to buy any commercial or get involved is because I bought a bunch of little crappy houses. Sure. Fixed them out, rented them out, created some value, and over time, because I bought them right or I manage them right, we get some equity. Or sometimes it's just timing. I mean, sometimes there's nothing good about the investment other than I've been in it for 10 years. So,
yeah. But the same principle is the same. It's what kind of return.
Okay.
So I think we want to meet you where you are. This is partly about you guys creating wealth for yourself. So I just put that up. Do you guys know where I'm gonna go on this one?
Well, I have a couple
Those of you who've
questions.
been in
Hopefully you can
my
answer.
classes before.
I have a couple questions. So like I've seen like a couple of properties that have big lots, like we're talking like maybe 0.62 or acre lots. And I look at them like, oh, I think about opportunity, but what I see and what you see are two different things. So maybe, I don't know if that's part of what you're planning on covering today.
Sure.
But, you know, what are you looking for? So we're not screening stuff, but when we see it, we know that it really is an opportunity.
Okay, great. And I love that. It's okay. We can start with that. That good for you
Yeah.
guys? So that's really how I got into development, and one of the easiest things to find is would like to add value. If you find a lot that has, when you look at it, it has easy access, maybe. When you're looking at splitting a lot, the first thing you're gonna look at is how do I get access to? So with the example you used, if you don't have a specific one, we could probably find one and pull it up. Maybe did you get Google Earth while you're driving, or? One of the first two things we look at on a lot split, which is a great way to add value, is how do you get access? So you need to figure out some way to get a road in there. So if it has frontage on a public street, that's the easiest and obvious, but most of the easy ones are, it's hard to make a lot of money if it's right there in front of everybody.
I have an address if you guys want.
Okay.
1254 West Winchester.
I split it off right now.
Yes,
If anybody runs out right now.
It's on the MLS.
So that's funny about me and tight-lipped about stuff. You do want to be a little tight-lipped about it, but I had a early broker in my career used to always joke with me. He said, you know, the deal of a lifetime in real estate only comes around about once a week. So, yes, you want to look at these things and lock in on it, but it's not.
There's only about 3 people here, you know, you're one of them, and then there's a couple other teams that we know what to do with it.
So this is, I had set up a hot sheet probably 10 years ago, and I think I still get the updates on the MLS, and it's for anything that's like bigger than a quarter of an acre residential that comes up on the east side. So I'm always looking for like infill stuff, and I'll usually just take a quick blush at it and see if it looks like something that could be split. And usually at this point, as far as my time efforts are, I'm not doing as many single lot splits because I've kind of learned that it's about as much work to go to 2 or 3 lots as it is 10, but it's a great way to learn. And if you have an opportunity to get into it, because a house is easy to finance, you can get hard money loan or you can get a residential mortgage. It's much lower barrier of entry. If you can find a house like this to buy, you get regular mortgage on it, and then if you split it off, I mean, it's a lot less money and a great learning opportunity for you guys to do. So,
Do 2 single families does that constitute a PUD? Or is it just, I mean?
if you choose single family.
Yeah, if you just have only 2.
Possibly. So do you guys know what he's asking on that?
It depends on the size of the lots, right?
Yeah, typically a PUD is gonna be something that was designed to be more dense and some shared spaces, so that'd be a planning and development. Is a term similar, very similar to an HOA, where it's like you put a whole project together and you have some shared cost. Usually when you just do a lot split, it's set up as either a flag lot, which, are you guys familiar with that term? So if, I did a deal like this in Midvale, I think on our last investment class we went through it, but the flag lot is, this was a split entry home in Midvale on 7th East, the 7th that's below Hillcrest High School, not the 9th East, so someone had converted this from a split level into an up and down duplex. And because there was multifamily next to it, which is something you're looking at, is where, you know, what's around it, how likely can you get some density or something. So we took this and then we created another lot back here to build another duplex. So that is what's called a flag lot. And so the other possibility would be as if this lot was more rectangular, and my math is, and if there was some way to split it that way, then you still have your access on the main road. That is just a really basic lot split. The third thing you would do in a development is if it's a really big piece of property, and let's say there's a house over here, where you actually bring in some roads and start splitting off, you know, having lots like this and maybe a cul-de-sac, and either keep a house or tear that down. And so, I'm getting to your answer on this, and we'll go look at your, I swear these guys are gonna be able to pull up Google Earth in a minute. But this would consist more of like a subdivision. And your choices would be, in some cities, you can do a private lane or a private road, which is typically a lot less cost. You can do, in Draper has changed an ordinance in the last 4 years. It was just a gold mine for all of us doing development. They allowed you to do up to 9 lots on a 20-foot wide driveway. Prior to that, changing that, it was 50 feet. So if you can imagine, a lot of these old horse properties in Draper didn't have enough width to put a 50-foot right-of-way public road on and 100-foot lots on each side. But the minute they shrunk that down to 20 feet, actually I think for 9 lots it's 25 feet, but it opened up a lot of these little parcels to do stuff like this. And if you drive around Draper right now, 3rd East, 7th East, 4th Street, Draper, because of the land values and stuff, you'll see an awful lot of this happening. People that have an acre or something now have 2 giant mansions on an acre as opposed to 1. And I think we did a couple deals like that on 4th Street. So each city's a little different on that. Almost every city has a flag lot zone, which the one tricky part of the flag lot is that they pretty much restrict that to 1 lot because of the requirements of the size of that. And then you can get a private lane in some cities like Draper where you could access and provide a multiple number. And we'll show you how to get on and look at the city code and ordinances. Like that's the next thing we'll look at. So does that answer sort of the question on the PUD?
What I had, yeah.
So something like this could be, you could possibly get that approved as a PUD, because if this is a private lane and it's narrow, then the city's not gonna come take garbage and remove snow, so you have to set up some sort of either a maintenance agreement with all the parties participate in that cost, or some sort of an HOA. HOAs are a little more cumbersome and expensive. I did a deal in Draper where we set it up just as a maintenance agreement. So there were like 4 parties, and every time when they bought a property, they owned the driveway collectively, and they just agreed that we're gonna put some money in a kitty, and every time that runs out, we're gonna participate. It's hard after a couple of ownerships to think that that would have the longevity without having some problems at some point. So
You can go back after that's developed and ask the city to adopt you. I would imagine there's ways to get incorporated.
which is why, from a regulation standpoint, why most cities hate private and HOAs and stuff, because they almost always, that's exactly what happens. 5 years in, when they have to redo the asphalt, or they don't like that they have to pay someone else to get garbage or shovel snow, they come back and say, city, take this on. They're like, well, it's not to our city specs, we can't get our trucks in there. So that's where most cities now are pushing back on that stuff and saying, put a 50-foot right of way in there so we can service it, which you lose some space, but it's nice because you don't have to have an HOA. So that's always a balance that I look at. Okay, so we have the property.
Do fire
Yeah, so
trucks
this is the-
and fire codes
That's it.
have to follow the same, do you have to follow the same fire expectations with a private lane? Like, a fire truck has to be able to turn around, it's like 150 feet or whatever, something like that.
No, so there's gonna be some difference, and the difference is usually in the distance from the fire, from the main service. So like on this one in Midvale that we did, a fire truck can get in there, and basically from here, they can service that, and if that house is burning down, they can get enough water to do that. If you have something where there were more lots back here, then we would have had to put in like some sort of a hammerhead. Which we'll go to that one on in Draper I was talking about in a minute when we're done with this one, and I'll show you what we do. But you have to design something. If it's more than, I believe, like 250 feet, and each city may have a little different code up to that fire marshal, then they're gonna require that you have some way that that truck can turn around and get in there and access it. Once you get over about each city's a little different. The state code is 30 units. For sure, if you get to 30 units, you need a second access point. Because what they're always concerned about is if there's this is the example they give us whenever we're trying to argue for more, is what if there's a car wreck and a fire at the same time? And there's a car wreck that's blocking a street, then 25 houses can burn down before we get the fire truck in there. Which kind of makes some sense. And for us to try to maximize yield on developments, we try to get as many units as we can on one access point. Because as you think about it, every road you put in there is less ground that you can sell for residential development.
Yeah.
But that's a great question. That is one of the limiting factors when you're looking at these deals to be able to split it, is what's the accessibility? And most fire marshals probably don't love a 20-foot road. They would, if they had their preference, it would be a wider road. But if the city code says it's okay. And in a lot of these cities, the fire marshal swings a pretty big stick. The deal that I have in Midvale that I talked about, we've got 2 duplexes on it, so I built 1 extra duplex. I actually have another 1/4 acre that I could build another duplex. But because I only have 20 feet wide, the fire marshal says no. You know, those guys in that back unit could block a road and we could extinguish a fire. So unless you find another way in, which in my case is either through county housing authority property or Hillcrest High School, and neither has wanted to grant me access. The answer is you're not building there. And I've been really nice to the fire marshal. I've asked him like every year for 12 years.
So should you have just made a 4-plex back there to begin with?
Yeah, that would have been a great idea, except for the zoning didn't allow it. So the zoning that I had was a duplex overlay, so it's a single family zone with a duplex overlay. So as you get studying different zoning maps and so forth, you can see what sort of density they allow. And usually it'll be either an R1, which is residential 1, and then it'll put a number after it to say 7,000, like an R1 7 is usually 7,000 square feet, which is a little less than 50 acre. Or very typical, like in West Jordan, would be an R1 10, which is 10,000 square feet. Or an R2 is what you would like, an R2 or R3 in different cities that allow for density. And I just couldn't convince them. The zoning on the master plan was single family will allow you to do duplexes as an overlay if you hit certain criteria, but never a 4-plex. And yes, in hindsight, it would have been a lot more efficient if I just was able to do that, but the city wasn't buying what I was selling. They come up with all kinds of great ideas that they're like, yeah, that's not gonna work. It's a constant battle back and forth, and you have 2 things. One, you have the master plan of the city, but you also have public sentiment, and you know, whether we like it or not, most of the public outcry is that density equals poverty equals crime equals I don't want it in my backyard. And so that narrative is changing a little bit with some of this affordable housing stuff, and because of how expensive it is to put, you know, keep grass green on a half acre and some of these things, there's a little bit of change, but most likely anything that's more dense than what the neighbors have is a political battle. So a lot of the cities, even though like the staff may know in their mind, hey, we gotta have more affordable housing, we'd like to have a 4-plex, that makes total sense. The city council don't wanna shorten the term enough by approving a bunch of 4-plexes in a neighborhood of single families. It's interesting now, even with Facebook, because you can get neighbors rallying against just about anything. It's kind of an interesting deal. So, okay, talk to me about this deal.
So, you got the single family house, it's like 1.35 acres, I think, something like that.
This one.
Okay,
Yeah, there's the house.
and so this is a different property.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you notice how I went right to this? One of the things I found in life is a lot of times you find little gold nuggets looking for something else.
Okay.
So that's another reason to dig in and start analyzing things. So you're trying to make this work, and all of a sudden, hey, look at this over here. What I like about this over here is, do you notice these access points are stubbed in there?
Yeah.
So whatever's going on here, you have some potential of possibly stubbing in and getting access from either this project that was built a couple years ago over here. So this,
So you're talking about water, sewer, gas?
yeah, or even access,
Roadway.
Oh,
access
roadway,
for
okay.
driving. So this is probably not wide enough to put a road in and get houses.
Mhm.
So one of the reasons this property may not have developed is no one could really afford to build a full road all the way back there and bring utilities back there and not yield any lots on this. My guess is this is probably maybe 80 feet wide. You can measure it up there if you want. Right, use that, go over to that measuring stick.
So hard to see. Sorry, I can't see it from here.
Okay.
Right, got it.
Okay, so we know how many centimeters it is. If you click on that, we could,
The mouse just really
it's
don't.
plenty wide. It's 16 feet would be my preference, which is right there.
Is this Google Earth just by itself, or is this a program that uses Google Earth?
It's Google Earth with the parlay
You
included.
know,
So you have to.
it used to be called Google Earth Pro, and now they took that away, so there's an add-on called Parlay, which I pay for. It's not too expensive. It's like $300 a year for up to 3 or 4 different users. And the nice thing we like about it is it gives you the parcel information, so I can get ownership, which you don't have on the regular Google Earth. Google Earth is a tremendous tool and saved us so much time, and we do a lot of due diligence on it. Okay, so back to this deal. I got distracted on this one, so this is 54 feet wide.
Yeah.
So essentially, to get a road back there, and I think this is Taylorsville City,
Yeah.
probably.
No, it should be great.
No,
No,
that's
this
a-
is
Taylorsville.
We're right by the border. Either way, there's West Jordan and Taylorsville and Murray all connect right in here. But this is really, that would be cumbersome because you'd have to put like a 25-foot road here, all the way back there before you started yielding lots. So that's probably locked that deal up.
So like if the house was far enough to the left where you could actually widen the road, I mean, I don't know, you know what I mean? I'm just looking at it.
Well, so this is the piece you're talking about, right?
What's that?
This is the one you actually were asking
The
about?
house, yeah. I don't really
1260.
care about the house so much as the acres I saw behind it.
Well, let's look at this. So, how much is it listed for?
565,
Okay.
I think.
And do you have any idea, I probably know that, Randy Anderson, no.
I'll
Okay,
pull up the
it's only
actual-
showing up as 0.24. Can you take that down? So I think what you would look at is, you wanna get what this distance is right here, and then figure out if you can get a road back there to do a flag lot.
Okay.
And again, sometimes the aerials are shifted, so it's not perfect. The other app that I use, and you guys can all get it for free for a month, is called Landglide. And it works on your Apple phone really well. And then I think it might be $19 a month, so you may not want to invest in it, but at least get a free, and it's kind of the same thing. The neat thing is when you're out on location, you can just, you'll open it up and it'll put you right where you are. Like right now, it would show you all the properties around here. It's kind of neat. So in this one, the way I would approach it is look at if I could get a driveway back here and a lot back there, then you would do a flag lot. And then the question is, how much is that lot worth?
Yeah.
And so, and then you would think about if you kept the house, how much is the house worth?
That's kind of
And
what
that-
I would think, yeah. So, I mean, the house has value and it's in good shape, so.
Yeah, it would be hard to imagine that you could afford to tear down a house like that in Taylorsville. You know, maybe in Sugar House you might be able to. So the way I would analyze that is to see, could I get a flag lot back there and how much is left? And really the measurement, and I know, sorry we're having some trouble with this, but the measurement would be what's the distance between the back of that house and that lot?
Okay.
And that'll give you an idea of whether you have enough space to get another lot back there.
And I guess the other option, just as you were talking and talking about those points, is if we could see farther back and let's say there was, you know, we see the subdivision on the left, if they had an access point where we could, you know, come into the backside of that lot, that may
Yep.
allow you to do something, I guess.
Exactly
Maybe
right.
some
So-
other options.
You might be able to figure out some way to get in here. Like to me, one play on this might be, and again, this is where when you tie stuff up, if you control property, then you win.
Yeah.
And so maybe you go in and you nibble around with these guys and get it tied up. Let's say you throw them an offer at 500 grand or something like that. You get convinced that this house is worth at least, I mean, if you could just clean it up and resell it for 500, I mean, how much downside do you really have?
Yeah, zero, yeah, you got free property at that point.
So if you could get this tied up with some time and then possibly go to these guys and say, hey, you only have 50 feet, I can give you another 30 feet. Now all of a sudden you've got something here. Or if by bringing this road back, if you put a road all the way over here, and then you can start putting lots this way, you have some more options, and it might be that you're opening this up for yourself to go in and do.
So are those, is that dirt behind there, are those two separate, owned by two separate people too?
Yeah, and I would be willing to bet that that's probably either under construction or under approval right now. I don't know that for sure. And keep in mind the Google Maps are somewhat dated.
And the lot could be just where the blue line we see right there, that's what you're talking about. And then the open space behind it is a different piece of property. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just check and see if the ownership is the same on 58, 57. So this is all that Anderson, 58. And then is 60. Huh. This is interesting because I remember the name, the gal passed away, she's a widow, and I think someone has taken that whole piece of property and are dividing it. So what you're looking at doing, this person, I'm guessing, is someone that's already done that for this? I don't know for sure, but you could look and call and just get the question on it. And so that could be that their plan and what they saw is that there wasn't enough room to just do it on this, so they left the house on the smallest lot they could.
Yeah.
Do you know on the MLS, how that lot you said is .64?
Actually,
It's
yeah, I was just looking at it,
1.31.
It's 1.31, yeah.
It's listed for 552.9.
I wonder if that's inclusive of all of that.
That's gotta be, because there's no way that lot right there.
Yeah, because this isn't 1.31.
acres.
And I think though, when I looked at it, just from the pictures on the MLS, it looks like the property's set down, like, where do you see the tree and behind there, it's kind of like there's a hill or something like that.
Yeah,
So I
there's
don't know
some
if
big
that's even
slope back
possible.
there. I mean, this is the, I think this is the Jordan River or a canal in that area. There's some great views over there. I think that would be worth going out and driving around and just looking to see what you could figure out on the site.
Well, just put me down for referral, how's that, so.
You're talking to the crowd here, someone might fit the deal.
Boyd, you had mentioned, you know, get your teeth into it, get the physical home that's existing tied up. You're pro, you probably move like liquid through that process, but for somebody like us, we go in, we make an offer, they accept it. You're trying to figure all this out in your due diligence period, your finance and appraisal, basically, so that you have that out.
You got 3 weeks.
What are you talking, or, I mean, because are we trying to tie that up for 60 days, 90 days, to the extent of
As
as
long
much
as
as you
you
can get?
possibly can. And
Sure.
that's where having relationships, like I think the new generation of realtor wants to do every deal on a text.
Yeah,
And I'm just old school enough to try to engage agents in conversation, glean as much information as I can. What do they need? What do they do? And it could be that it's an estate, they just want to be cashed out, 30-day offer or nothing, then I'm probably not a player on it. Because I wouldn't take, it's too big of a risk unless I could literally steal it.
So I
Sure.
found this through a friend of mine, he was looking on the Marshal Service, on the US Marshals, and it's a seized property.
Huh?
And so he's like, gosh, look at it, and I was like, well, you can't buy it, because he bought another house from me. But I started looking at this, and then I saw the lot size, and then this class came up, and I'm like, well, this is a perfect opportunity
Yeah.
to say, hey, look, there might be nothing there, but at the same time, well, it's a great property to look at, to see why not, and then what you're looking
Yeah,
for.
the other cool thing is something small like this, again, it doesn't take an act of Congress to get it financed. I mean, we could probably raise $100,000 in this room to use as the equity to tie the thing up. I mean, you tie it up with just an earnest money deal, but get as much time as you can.
Yeah.
The other thing is sometimes you can get more time after you do diligence. So you could, if all they'll give you is 45 days, you can, on day 40, you can come and say, hey, I've spent money on a survey, I've met with the city, I've done all these things, I still have 4 or 5 things I need to get answered, I'd like to keep going, can you extend due diligence for 30 days? You're always trying to convince them, I'm always trying to convince them, you're closer to the finish line with me than by bringing in someone else. That may or may not be true. Now, if they have backup offers and cash offers, then it's not. And if you're not progressing, and that's one of the things, when we're a listing agent, we want to protect against guys like me that are just tying stuff up. You know. But we also want to put some sort of check frame so that you're progressing. And if you don't have something done, like you've made some progress or spent some money or some legitimate information to bring back after your 45 days, then it's pretty hard to argue. The other thing that I've gotten to, now that I have a little more cash available to me, I used to do all this on a shoestring and never give up any earnest money, but I'm willing to, especially in the hot market, release earnest money at a certain point. So when I tie up land deals now, I typically say, give me 90 days, and they're like, we only want to give you 60, and I need 120. So I'll say, all right, give me 90, and after 90 days, I'll release the initial earnest money, I'll raise the earnest money, or so we have sort of some check-in points to make sure that I'm paying attention. And that, from a seller standpoint, if I represent a seller, that's like, if I'm making Brooke cut a check in 30 days, then I'm guessing she's paying attention for the first 30 days. If she does nothing and comes and says, gosh, I didn't, I'm still waiting on my appraisal, it's like, next.
Yeah.
And that's good, kind of, again, that's the finesse of talking to an agent to kind of figure out what they want. Sometimes all people want is a little bit of income or something like that. So like, I don't think the U.S. Marshal Service, but let's say this was an estate and there's some, they just buried grandma and they're all chomping at the bit to get their riches, And with something like that, you might say, you know what, we'll release $10,000 after 60 days. But then we'll pay you a little more than what you could get on the regular market, but we're gonna need 5 months to get this thing figured out and closed. So those are sort of finesse ways of how you.
So not necessarily the deal there for you is you're buying time, not trying to lower the price down, because the money's in the lots or whatever expenditure you have.
I think you made a big jump on that assumption, is the deal still has to make sense.
Yeah, it still
I
doesn't
mean,
make sense, but $10,000
I'd
is
like
not
to
gonna
say-
make or break it.
Your price, my terms. I mean, I could figure about anything out if I had 10 years to do it. But it's still, if it's not a good deal, it doesn't matter. I mean, you still have to, on this piece of paper, I have to convince myself, for $570,000, I have a house that I can sell for maybe 300 and potentially 2 more lots that I think are worth, just in rough numbers, probably 150 apiece. So then, if that's the gross amount on this, say, is 600, I know that it's gonna cost me, in my head, even on a small private lane, by putting in roads and infrastructure, you're probably looking at 25 or 30,000 per lot at least for the infrastructure. So maybe I went too fast on that. So on my yellow pad, I would write down, how much can I sell the house for? So you guys are real estate agents, do a CMA, if that house is just on a quarter of an acre, maybe it's worth 400, I mean, I don't know what every condition is. So 400 I put on there, and then if I think after looking at the zoning and what I can get on the roads, most likely I can get 2 or 3 lots in there. And then if a building lot in Taylorsville right now is probably 150.
So are you taking 2 to 3 lots on both those parcels or just that one?
Yeah, both of the, all of this. Because I think we've established that it's gotta include all of these.
So you can only get about 3 on there, you say, 3 or 4?
Yeah, unless you got a full zone change and we're gonna do something like this, then I would probably look at tearing down the house, and if it's an acre, you can probably get maybe 9 or 10 townhome units on it.
Oh, okay.
But they're at different values, so we can look at that too. So let me just follow where I was going.
Sorry.
So if you have, what did we say the house was worth, 400?
400.
Write that down, and the lots are worth 150 each. And worst case, you get 2, best case, you get 3. So now we're at, what's our gross number? 750. So if the 750 means we're getting 3 lots, we're probably gonna spend 25,000 times 3, or 75. So take 700 minus 75.
625.
625, and so you're gonna have what I would call soft cost survey and things like that, engineering. Let's just say that's $20,000, which probably leaves you plenty of fluff, more than you need.
605.
605, and how much are they asking for it?
550.
550? It's pretty thin, but, I mean, if you could get it for 500 and you think there's a 605 and a 60-day deal, that's probably something I would at least write up. Certainly, the lower you get it going into it, the better.
You're just developing, you're not gonna build, I'm sure you have contractors that you have relationships with, that you're saying, hey, I have these 3 lots, do you want them, or you just put
This
them
one
on
you're
your
putting
lots?
paper, you just paper lot it, right?
Either way, it just depends on who you are and what you're doing. I mean, you could look at this as, hey, if you had the capital and wanted to build the whole thing out, you can certainly do that, partner with a builder. The quickest and easiest and least amount of money is a paper lot deal, tie it up, almost like guys sell, did we offend you? Hannah?
Yeah, I'm out of here.
She's going to write up the deal again.
Really?
I had a previous
Thanks for joining us
scheduled
on
engagement.
that. We
I
do
got it.
stuff.
Pick her up at preschool.
Okay.
Okay, see you guys. Thank you.
So all of those things, and guys, I hope we're not getting too out of the weeds on this. To me, if the deal makes sense, you can have various exit strategies. You ought to look at all those different strategies for yourself. As a newer investor, it's so expensive to start putting all the improvements in. You have to get different kinds of loans, building houses. That's a lot bigger project. If you could put a couple buddies together and put down $50,000, get a hard money guy, tie this thing up for 4 months and have it divided and sell it to the next guy, in my opinion, most of the value is made in that, creating the lots.
You snubbing it and bringing in the roads, or are you just like?
I don't care.
Doesn't even matter.
It doesn't matter, but as you're in your due diligence, you'll do all your homework to know what the cost of that stuff is, because the buyer's gonna wanna know that. So you're gonna wanna do all your homework, and again, you might convince yourself that you wanna stay in it, or maybe find a builder partner that may wanna go put some money in it, but you just start spending a lot more money.
Sure.
On almost any of my development deals, if I can get out of it, where on paper, that's where I make most of my money. Once I start putting money in the ground, paying interest, paying bonds, I mean, it's freaking expensive, isn't it?
Super expensive.
So, it just, I mean.
Well,
it's
to find a
nice-
builder right now
It's
is-
nice to be able to tell my grandkids that actually built something, but there's way more subdivisions around town that I can drive by and say, hey, I had the idea on that.
That's my idea.
And think about that just with investments too, like, I mean, if you find a nice beater on the MLS or something, sometimes if you tie it up, just having the idea, you tie it up and go through the due diligence process, which is really how I got into this, is because I used to take properties to investors and the threshold to convince them. And I got to thinking, man, these guys aren't smart, they're not looking at all the angles, they don't know much about real estate, they're not gonna go and spend as much time researching this and driving to buy it. They want some, just tell me I can make 25 grand easy. And I'm like, I can't believe they're passing on these things. So I would start tying them up and then call my investor database and say, hey, tied up this deal, here's what I see, here's how I analyzed it. I think there's $25,000 in this deal. I can just make a commission and flip it to you if you'd like to, or, you know, tie me in on a small piece of it, and you control it, or we use your money. But that's, you know, you're taking advantage of your mind and what you're seeing without having to be a big boy player and all the money.
And some of that could happen prior to your funds becoming due. So you're just
Yes.
pushing all that through before your deadline.
As much does
Oh.
beforehand,
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
So Dave and I are working on a deal right now, which is great that we're partnering on this, because he's a retail guru, but and this comes down to relationships. I have done a couple of deals in South Jordan over the years. For whatever reason, the city manager, Gary Watcott, really likes me. We've gotten to have a nice relationship. I've known him and he's known me for 5 or 6 years. We've always been polite with each other. I tried to buy a piece of property from them 6 years ago when I was doing another project nearby, right next to City Hall in South Jordan. And negotiations broke down. I was willing to walk away from it because it was just too much. I'm like, he's like, I have to sell it. It's taxpayers' money. I got to sell it at appraised value. I'm like, there's no way I can pay that and do good. We parted as friends and we stayed in touch on it. And here we are 5 or 6 years later. I'm in a meeting on another project and he says, hey, why don't you take another run at that? City council, you really want some money for senior center, and they've been bugging me about when are we gonna sell that property? I'm like, all right. Again, nothing happens fast for the city, so 6 months later, I end up under contract with South Jordan on this piece of property. And Dave's out here working a retail deal. He's got a restaurant guy that might want it. I mean, we just went and talked to all the restaurants in the city hall next to us and said, whose lease is up and wants a cool new shiny space? And I have some office users that want some office, so we're trying to collect 2 or 3 different office users for an office building. And in a perfect world, I'll spend the money on the survey and the engineering and some of that stuff, but the chances of me actually closing on that, what is it, $1.6 million or $5 million or something like that? I mean, the chances of me actually closing on that is almost 0. I mean, my goal is this group that's doing the office building will create an investment group and they'll close on that and build a building. that I get some fees on, or staying as a partner on. Dave's retail guys, he'll have like pre-leasing on some of the buildings, and if that's, we either go to an investor or just close on that lot. And so again, a lot of that is just,
So you're gonna tie
you
it up.
have
maybe
some risk
30%.
capital, but you don't always, whenever you tie up something, don't feel like you always have to close it. I think one of the values is us as real estate agents is if you have some good clients and stuff, and you can articulate to them how they're gonna make money on a deal, they would love that deal. So when you have the first look at all this stuff, you get to peek behind the curtains, they're looking on Zillow, and they want you to be able to talk them through how you make money on it, whether it's a fixer-upper or a lot split like this, or even something way more sophisticated.
Okay, so I have a question, because in the back of my mind, I'm like, wholesaling's dead, like, you can't just flip a property to somebody else, so how do you do that legally above board, not worrying about licensing?
You suggesting that I'm breaking the law here, keep telling you about
Well, it's hard, because I've been really getting into a
Addison,
lot
would
of-
you cut the Facebook
I've been like really getting into a
live?
lot of investing lately, and I'm like, all this stuff is like, isn't it kind of borderline illegal, so how do you do it so that you don't get in trouble?
It's a great question. So I think what you're talking about is like a flip or
Like almost like you're bird dogging your property.
yeah. You can bird dog a property as a real estate agent. I mean, there's no reason you can't. The REPC now says that this contract is not assignable.
Yeah.
And that has changed in the last few years because most agents were doing stuff like every time they saw a good deal, they'd just tie it up and say, and or assigns, and then take it out, basically they're buying a listing. So I don't believe in that, but if you're adding value, in other words, if you're figuring something out, getting bids on what a development is gonna cost and figuring out with the city, I mean, you truly are adding value, so you're flipping and selling what that value is, your time and energy is worth some money. The other thing that's possibly illegal where people have really gotten in trouble on this stuff is if you do what's called a simultaneous close. So Liz Bear is supposedly buying this, but you're flipping it at the closing table and never using your money and never taking title. The concern on that is that the lender or the investor is misled on what's really happening.
It used to be legal.
It used to be legal, but lenders have really on the downturn, so what the lender doesn't wanna do is, let's say Shane is buying a property for 150, and then I'm buying it from him for 200. And because there's no record of his transaction, because it's gonna happen in the same day, I go to get a loan and try to get appraised at 200. Well, if the lender knew and the appraiser knew that Shane is buying that for 150, there's no way they would appraise it. So you're misleading second lender, not the first lender, not you, not the investor, not anyone else, but the argument is that the second lender was not informed on that.
So how much downtime do you need between those transactions to legitimately move forward?
FHA requires, I believe it's a 90-day seasoning period, and they also like to see that you've added some value. So if it's a fix-up, or have you put some money into the property, things like that. And in the realm of investors and development, it's more cash buyers, and they're not as specific on like commercial deals and things like that. I mean, I did a transaction with Boyer and Company this year. They're very sophisticated. It's not like anyone's gonna show up and say, Boyd snuck up on Boyer and Company, you know? And they knew I was flipping, I mean, I actually owned that piece, but I bought it just to sell it to them. And they knew, and everybody in the whole deal knew exactly what I was doing.
So get it in writing, you should be fine.
What's that?
Just make sure everybody knows what's happening, you should be fine.
Yeah, and you can, on an addendum, say both parties agree that this is an assignable contract. It's, I can put that, there's an addendum. And so you may do that. It may spook some people if you're in competing offers, because if I'm a seller, I don't want you to just go assign your interest to anybody. And even if it's a non-assignable contract and you get 45 days due diligence, I can go and say, hey, Sean, I still want to buy your house. Here's the deal. It's a lot more investment than I thought. My bank's requiring more capital. I had to bring in Dave to do this. So actually Dave is we're gonna transfer the contract to Dave. I'm gonna participate in it. You put that addendum. Anytime you're an agent and participating in the profit, disclose it out of that. But the flip thing is totally legal. It's still America. You can make a profit on stuff. You just have to make sure it's so disclosed that whoever's at the end of the flip when the music stops wasn't misled in the transaction.
Yeah, upgrade the property, do new kitchen, flooring, put it back on the market, totally doable.
Yes, and I want you guys to think about this. your value and your brains, allow yourself to get paid for that. I mean, our first thought as workers is that I gotta go do something, I gotta swing a hammer or something.
Laborious, yeah.
Value is created by your freaking brain. And the fact that you know as a real estate guy how to put a deal like this together, you know how much lots are, that's all value you're bringing to the table without a tool belt. So don't discount that. I had a mentor teach me one time, he was making a lot more money than me, and I was working for commissions, and I was working for a developer, and I just, hey, I'm making 3%, this is great. He's like, well, is it? They're making $1 million, you're making 15,000. Well, yeah, isn't that great? I mean, you know. So it took me a little while to figure out, but he's like, he always said, I assess a deal this way. A third of the overall value of a deal is finding the deal, sourcing the deal. A third of the value is the expertise, and a third of the value is the money. And I've used that over the years to look at when I source a deal to say, okay, where did the deal come from? Did someone bring it to me? Whose expertise is getting this thing approved? So if you are paying attention and coming to classes and learning about this stuff, and we'll go talk to Taylorsville City and go out on site and get in my office and ask a bunch of questions, and you're adding the expertise to the deal, then I think it's reasonable for you to say, Sean and Shane, we're partners. I found the deal, and I'm the expert. You guys put up the money, you get 30%, I get 60. That's if you're the expert and you found the deal. If you're just the expert, and again, expert is a weird term. I mean, who's contributing the most capital? And usually in a partnership, energy to putting it in, it's a combination of the partners. Like this deal with Dave and I mean, we're both bringing expertise to the table. I know absolutely almost nothing about retail. I don't know what restaurant guys want. I don't know what any of that stuff. It's not an area of expertise for me, and that's like a walk in the park for him to get on the phone and call him and talk to him about a retail space on Red Road Road. So with this deal, I found the deal. We haven't determined who comes up with the money yet, which is usually the easy part once you can have a deal. And he's bringing the expertise on a part of it, I'm bringing the expertise on a part of it. So roughly we'll, sort through that based on that parameter I just talked to you about. It's kind of a good way.
0.18.
What's that?
You get 0.18, he gets 0.18, someone else gets a third, another person gets a third, everybody's getting.
Yeah, I mean, agree with you. Those are very rough parameters, but I guess what I'm trying to get you to think about is if you bring a deal like that to your SOI and say, hey, let's go do this deal, don't be ashamed to take more than a commission on it.
Sure.
At the very least, you ought to say, one, I'm gonna get my commission and I'll either leave it in the deal if that helps, or, when we resell these things after you fix it up, absolutely, you're gonna list with me and all that, and potentially have a piece of the upside. This is a good one to look at. I think that gave us a lot of good things to think about, and I guess the next step I would do is go to Taylorsville City. Do you want to jump on the city? Is that helpful for you guys? Or maybe we should see if there's another deal people want to talk about. But I would go to Taylorsville City on the master plan, just look what the zoning is. And the thing you have hope is you always look for what's close to it, because there's townhomes next to that. You might be able to get a zone for like a townhome, which would be like 8 units an acre versus 2 or 3 units an acre. And you go in to talk to the planners or call them and get a lot of information on the website. And most planners as government workers are the best thing they can tell you is not a chance, because then you just go away and they get back to Facebook. So keep asking questions, but if they can talk you out of it because they work for them, they probably will.
Sometimes.
But if they're sophisticated enough and adamant to say absolutely no, then you can believe them too before you spend a year of your life getting convinced it's no.
It always helps too to go to all the other property owners around, right? Start making some calls, is it available, what would you sell for? I mean, sometimes.
We saw something like on that Google Maps where we saw there's a
Yeah.
lot on the other side.
Sometimes
Hey, we're looking at
there's-
this, would you make a deal on this? Then you did, might open up even a better opportunity.
Yes. Or you get a strategic piece that someone really needs to make that work, like another access or something.
Yeah.
And that can go both ways. You're just looking to get one piece tied up and then you can build on it. So you may
Yeah.
want to try to get a
It's having the
contract.
first piece tied up and then say, I control this, and What are you doing on yours?
And, cause there's no reason to really go around and start trying to make deals once you got the first piece tied up.
No, because all you're doing is giving somebody else an idea.
Yeah, I've done that a lot. I put a whole deal together just have someone else come in, like, someone says, oh, that's a great idea. My brother works for Ivory Homes, I think I'll give him a call. Thanks, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Can you get a referral fee for that?
What, so this is just the zoning map, gives you an idea of what you look at, and, I mean, we could have a whole class on this, but over here it talks about zone changes, and they're color coded. And then there's you go into the city ordinance and you can get like a sheet that tells you exactly what each of those zones mean. It usually what you're trying to figure out is the density, which is how many units per acre, and like the minimum lot width and things like that. There's also, you can find there's so much information on the website. If you guys are interested in this kind of stuff, I would just pick whatever city or town you're used to and like working in. Just go spend a little time looking at it. You may also want to look at whenever the planning commission or city council has meetings, they will post not only the agenda, but the full packet, which will have any of the engineering and stuff I'm paying for, and all my arguments with the planning staff and what the planning staff's recommendations is all available to the public once it's a public meeting. So you can look through those PDFs or go to the meetings. A lot of the meetings now are live streamed, so like Lehigh City will live stream their meetings, and you learn a lot about deals by watching Ivory and Edge and all these guys try to get something approved, standing in front of city council, and you can do it on your phone, sitting in the comfort of your own home now in a lot of cases.
This is where all the bribes come from?
What's that?
This is where all the bribes come from? Bribes, you know? Where Ivory Home says, here, I'll give you this parcel of land over here for a park and rec, and you give me zoning.
What is more common is the general public thinks all that's going on. And I'm sure some of that goes on and some of it has to do with relationships, but it's such a transparent world right now. I mean, there's so many, look, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I think people, like, I did that deal with Boyer, and it would be easy for me standing on the sideline to say, well, they bribed somebody because they got way more density. The thing is, they're freaking pros. They handled their business, they have a 25-year track record, they covered every concern that the staff had, and they took the heat from the public, and they got it done. And someone else that went up there probably couldn't do that, and they couldn't also say, we've been building in South Jordan for 20 years, show us one that didn't work. So, have there been bribes? Has the Boyer Company or someone like that contributed to some political, or been supportive of some of the leadership in the cities? Probably, most likely completely transparent and legal, but I mean, there are still deals you read about concerning like Terry Deal, and there's some of the stuff, if you read like the UTA, some of that stuff, but I just don't, I think the way the world is right now, it's pretty hard for that stuff to happen without it getting exposed after a while. Now, whether our state can figure out how to prosecute what color criminals is another question. I haven't seen them do that.
Yeah.
They'll make a tweet about it.
Gordon, just one more comment on this. Sometimes there's a land use plan for a city that is kind of a wish list map. If they could rezone some other areas, here's what we'd like, or convert it in the future.
What was that
So
called?
those are really good too. It can help with a rezone.
Daybreak has a ton of that.
What is it called?
Land use,
Land use.
some places still hear it called a general plan also. So the zoning
Right,
is
there's
what
one
currently is
that's on the bottom of
existing,
the
the general
general.
is sort of our master plan for the future.
Next to the
The other place I see a lot of opportunities is when you see a subdivision
There should
going
be
in,
a
that may
land use
open up a property that was locked in before.
one of the
Well, let's say
PDFs.
Boyer goes and gets 8 units approved in South Jordan. If you find the piece next door, it's pretty hard for them to argue that you can't do 8 units. And my first 10 years, or 3 years, probably not 10 years, of doing this, I worked for Sudweeks Development, was my first real development client. All they did is they followed Ivory, Ivory was doing a deal, they would knock on all the neighbors and figured, if they already have 15 acres, they probably don't have the energy to talk to all the neighbors, so I'm gonna go do that. And what Ryan Sudweeks did is he would have me tie him up, and then he would go into Ivory's office and sell the property.
Walmart.
See, so that's what I was getting at, is because I had a property that was about 4 or 5 acres, and it looks like it was only zoned half-acre lots. Right next door to it, like the bordering wall, basically, Ivory had the quarter-acre lots. And we went to them and said, hey, we're right next door, why can't we have quarter-acre lots? And they said, oh, sorry, Ivory gave us some land for that, and we were able to approve for this. I'm like, oh, really? So
Yeah,
That's what I'm getting
I
at.
guess you could call that a bribe, it's pretty common practice. I mean, if they're gonna build a city park or do something like that, one of the biggest transactions I was ever involved in is up in Clearfield. Woodside Homes bought 250 acres, and they got incredible density, 5.5 or 6 units an acre, and did great on the thing, but they built a 50-acre city park. I mean, so, is that a bribe? I don't
I think it's a
know.
perk.
I mean, that's like,
It's
it's a pretty sweet deal, because they're like, yeah, people want small lots, and we're giving the city, in an area where you have no amenities, we're giving you a 50-acre park, that's groundwork. I mean, that's part of the deal, and that's more of a trade-off than a bribe. A bribe is like, hey, meet me at the Utah One Center parking garage before the legislation center, and bring all the legislators and the city council, and I'll make sure y'all have a happy Christmas kind of deal. So
Yeah, I get
there's
that.
always negotiations on those things, and most of it is so transparent. I mean, you can, if you really wanted to find out that deal with Ivory, I think you could probably dig into the archives and know exactly what the agreement was and so forth. But
Just give an acre.
the other thing could be that if you go to the master plan, even though you're right next door, I mean, if they clearly have bigger lots scheduled in one area of the city, there's gotta be some place where it stops. Yeah, we were kinda,
No, you, that,
Patient.
just like, go back a little bit, I have a client, they want us to use their contract that they have, because it states that the contract can be reassigned.
yep,
Is that what your thoughts,
yeah,
is that okay?
yeah, so they wanna flip it to you?
No, I'm helping them find it, but they wanna use their contract so we can flip it to someone else.
Oh, okay, so you're representing the buyer, and they have something other than the standard purchase contract? I would just have broker Dave look at it. It should be, I mean, we as agents want to use the state approved forms as much as we can, or something that an attorney built. Sometimes builders will come into their own contract, and I do everything I can just to go to the state approved form because I'm most comfortable with it. My preference would be, if they want to do that, is just have an addendum created or use the MLS form that says this contract is assignable. I think it's supposed to be section 19 of the rec sheet. To say, as per section 19, both parties agree that this contract can be assignable. And I believe there's a standard language for that also. They used to let us do, you just scratch through 19 and put NA, and I don't think they like us doing that anymore. I mean, before people sign it, I'm not talking about on your way to closing. Little turn.
Everything's.
There's actually a form in there that actually discloses how many people are getting paid and who's getting paid. And as long as that's put in there, you can do that. So,
Yeah, there's
like if I'm
an
flipping,
addendum.
you know, you have a property, you're getting paid, and then you're flipping it to Liz and she's getting paid, as long as everybody knows about it and it's on this form, then it's totally legal.
That's the assignment form, and I would get
Yeah.
familiar with that, because it does, the other thing that does is clarifies what commissions are being paid and so forth, because that can get confusing. If there's a listing agent, a buyer's agent, then it's flipped, there's another buyer's agent. In that assignment clause, I mean, you don't wanna give up your agent, your money as the buyer's agent, so that does address that. It's a neat tool to learn how to do, and I think if your investor has their own contract, maybe they went to an investor class or something, if you're comfortable with it, I would just talk to broker Dave a little bit about it. And I would rather you don't wanna say, hey, we can't do that, you always wanna try to accommodate, do everything you can, but the reason I like using the standard form is that I'm just most comfortable with it, most agents are, and the way we get into trouble with contracts is if we overlook something, or if someone presents me an offer that looks exactly like the Utah State form, and it's 95% is, but I mean, I'm not gonna wanna read through every single, and if you miss some in your client, there's some, there's some.
Well, that section 19 says it can be reassigned as long as the sellers agree to it prior, like the addenda that you're talking about, yeah. And then if you have personal business interest in it, that has to be disclosed too,
Yeah.
prior. It looks like it's manageable.
Yeah, it is manageable, it's just, again, if you're trying to
Just see
treat
what I-
somebody, you know that, I mean, just what
Yeah.
Liz was saying, if you're being a scumbag, you're being a scumbag. If you're doing a transparent deal and adding value, then it can be done.
I used to work with this investor that I thought was so great because he would write his own contracts and send them to me. And and I sent one. Luckily, we didn't go under contract, but he had like basically gotten rid of some stuff in the contract, just blanked it out basically. Like, oh, that didn't go under contract.
Which
But-
is, the old buyer, they do have the right to do that. You
Yeah.
just have to know what your
Yeah.
contract says if you're representing.
Yeah, but my question is, as far as getting cities to work with you on rezoning or not rezoning, are there cities that have been really great to work with, and then ones you're just like, just don't even?
It kind of ebbs and flows. It depends on what their wants and needs are and how much they have. Like West Jordan had way too many townhome projects. So about 5 years ago, the council just lost their mind and said, we're not gonna do any more of that ever.
Is there any cities that you found that are more flexible or that are like really hard to deal with?
It changes with who's the mayor, who's the city
Oh, does it?
council, and it really does change.
The other thing is, I think they're all skeptical of new. Like, again, West Jordan is one of my least favorite cities. I mean, I've done a few things in there, and it's just way more cumbersome than it needs to be. But after muscling through this project we're doing right now, it's too bad because I'm so worn out with them, but at least I know who all the players are. I know how to get answers. It would make sense for me to go do another deal in West Jordan if I could handle it. And that happened to me, I mean, a lot. So once they're familiar with you and you kind of understand the personalities, there's always a chain of command that takes you a while to figure out. Like years ago in Draper, the city engineer pretty much ran the whole show. He's not there anymore. And I didn't realize that, so I was always working with the planning guys, and I would get yeses, and the city engineer would just be a no at everything until I realized you start with him. And those are the nuances you only get by doing it. I will say that Lehigh City has been awesome. They're great humans. It's weird, you go there and they're like, you come away feeling pretty good, and like I'm doing a deal with Saratoga, and I come away thinking that I'm like a criminal or something. Like everything I do with Saratoga, they're making it seem difficult and cumbersome, and like I'm trying to steal from them. I'm like, sorry, all I'm trying to do is pay you fees. Do you remember that? I was paying a water fee. All I was trying to do is hand them a check for like $10,000, and they like, oh, you have to go somewhere else, you have to go somewhere, I can't believe you want to do this. And I'm like,
I'm trying to give you money.
just trying to give you horrible people money. That's the part I don't want on Facebook. Active project out there. Love you, Sarah. City planner, Gordon, minor, engineer.
Are you forecasting with all the growth that Utah has, are you buying land on the assumption of a new resort going in Ogden? The new, the port that's coming out, you know, are you buying land assuming that there's going to be growth?
No, I don't have the kind of cash to do that. That's a big boy's game. I mean,
Sure.
there are people I bought land in Saratoga, 4 or 5 years ago, and that was speculative because I knew that there was a hospital, at least considering going in, which has now become a lot more than a hospital. And so I kind of got lucky in that one. But they had the Spice Center in Lehigh and a whole bunch of other things going on. If I had all the cash, I mean, guys are doing great doing that, where they go out. We're looking at some stuff in town in southern Utah County right now. And what we found is there are some big money guys that I am aware of that are down there, have already bought up 50-acre and 100-acre pieces.
Oh, yeah.
It's probably just, the biggest one is the church. I mean, they will, as they're developing, they had all the farm ground in Riverton, right? And so what they do is now that's in development. They probably sold that for $300,000 an acre, a couple hundred acres. So now they're going out to the next ring out because they're very patient. They have all kinds of money. They'll take whatever piles of millions, they just turn that farmland and go buy probably 10 times as much farmland in the next ring. So they can do that. Other investors can. I don't have that kind of jack. So what I'm doing is I'm optimistic about the market, and I feel like people are going to buy stuff if I find a project that I can develop for them. I am very optimistic about stuff, but like Ogden, I've been hearing Ogden is going to break any day now since the day I got in real estate, and it just does nothing for me. You can buy cheap real estate up there, so if you want to speculate, I feel better or worse about different areas of town. Ogden's never been one that really got real high on my list.
Sure.
Has it ever made the list?
I've done, just trying to do stuff on there, and again, there's a low barrier to entry. You can buy a lot more there than other places. And again, I said that about Saratoga Springs. I mean, I told everybody that would listen to me that the ranches and
5 Mile Pass
and all that stuff was just implosion waiting to happen. And I pounded that drum for 5 years, and I mean, it's been famously successful. And if I just shut my damn yap and bought ground for 20 grand an acre 10 years ago out there, then I wouldn't have to be working anymore. So, you know.
Yeah.
What other questions? Hopefully that was helpful for you guys, just kind of thinking through it. I don't want you to think about just land stuff. The other thing with Dave is like some of these bigger commercial deals, even if you hear about them and start playing with them, the more you can have a solid deal to look at, like an 8-plex or a 12-plex, and start going through the process of analyzing, it just makes you more confident on the next one. And don't get discouraged if you go through all this homework, like on this Taylorsville deal, if you spend 6 or 10 hours and you don't get this deal, I mean, you've learned a lot more, you're that much more prepared on the next deal.
But the fact that you're driving down the street and you're looking beyond the house, right? You're looking at what's behind, that's what you need to look at. That's where you find those unique pieces.
Anyone know the name Mike Watson?
Yeah.
He's kind of a guru investor guy. There's a lot of good with Mike. Like all of us, there's probably the other side of that coin also, but very smart guy. But he used to teach these classes about how to be a clientless realtor and do investing. And one of the things that I love that he always talked about is just getting area of expertise. Like, and it should be around somewhere that you either live or work or have some other property. Just kind of focus on that area and really pay attention to what's happening, and maybe go talk to the planners instead of trying to know everything about everything like I did. I mean, maybe pick Taylorsville, or if you live in Riverton, get to know what's going on in Riverton, because as you're paying attention, things are gonna start happening. You'll see like somebody doing construction, so there could be another opportunity. And he even said, get down to like a 3-mile radius and just know everything that's going on in there. And even like, he used the example of Midvale, sort of like around where my project is there by Hillcrest. I mean, within that 3-mile radius of there, I mean, there's probably been 50 transactions in the last 10 years. And, you know, of those, if I was really focused on that area, I probably could participate in, you know, 2 or 3 of those. And I'm much better prepared once something comes up. I know what the market value is, and I know kind of some of the things that can happen in there. And so it's a lot shorter learning curve to figure something out as opposed to going to Ogden or Salem, Utah, or someplace where I'm starting over every time. It's the same theory whenever someone calls pitching me an out-of-state deal. I'm like, really the only value I'm bringing to any deal is my market expertise and knowledge. So if you want to talk to me about a deal in some other state, I lose that completely. Doesn't mean there couldn't be deals there, but.
Do you own a separate entity for your investments for, well, I mean, you're all in commercial, but would we open a separate company to protect in case you lost your ass on something? I mean, is there a?
Yeah, that's probably another class. I mean, you would talk to an attorney or something about assets. I mean, LLCs are pretty simple. I don't like having to set up an LLC for every single transaction. So a lot of what I do is in an operating company. So I'll do most of everything I run my commissions through and everything is called BB Sold, and I will handle a lot of development stuff up until the point I close it. I typically don't want to own anything long-term in BB Sold, so at that point I'll either Boyd and Kim Brown will own it or some LLC. I wouldn't worry about get a deal going first, but having an investment LLC or a whole properties probably makes good sense. And again, accountants and attorneys are probably, there's a lot of different opinions on that, but guy gave me some good advice on that about limiting liability. He says, well, do good deals.
Yeah.
It doesn't protect everything, but. Hey, thanks, Boyd. Thank you. Any other last questions, Clayton? Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
We burned up an hour, huh?
Yeah.
When are you gonna do another class?
I don't know. I mean, I think we'll probably try to make a frequency of this if it's helpful to this forum, maybe once a month or something. From time to time, I'll do like an investment class based on MREA or something, or MREI. And I'm one of several assets in this company. I mean, there are other, Cameron, Spencer, Williams, there's a lot of other guys too. Mona and Kelly have made a ton of, they're really good, smart investments. And I think, the nice thing is you have a lot of people in here that you can ask questions and learn from. And I just encourage you to go think about expanding what your earning capability and give it to the cash flow quadrant. I mean, as realtors, we make money, but if you don't take that income and make an investment, you know, put it into some assets, you're gonna just have to be realtoring the rest of your life. Which is somewhat appealing.
Somewhat.
It'll be nice to do it because you want to, or be able to turn it on or off depending, you know, once you're, if you're gonna spend 20 years in this business, you should own some real estate.
Can we ask you guys for advice in the future if we're looking at this stuff? Or
No.
if I'm not-
No,
not
you have to wait for the next
door?
class.
There's a fee for that.
There's always for that, or is that?
Scooter, it's always a catch-22, that whenever I do these classes, I'll get like 100, I'll get a budget.
I do like to end, you know, but what's hard for me is people catch me on the way to the bathroom when I'm like bouncing my seat, and they'll be like, hey, what about this fourplex? So, but if you can like do enough homework so that we can make a decision, send us an email or show up to Dave and say, here's the property, here's my specific questions, that's helpful to us. And then just working through either Blake or Michelle. Dave's here a lot, he's very analytical on this stuff. And Shad too, I mean, Shad was with us for 4 years, he's learned a lot about how to look at deals. I think he has a pretty good perspective on analyzing some things as well.
It's so easy, you walk right past my desk every time you're going to the bathroom.
Yeah, catch me on the way back. I'd love to talk to you.
This is great, thanks, Lloyd, thanks you guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.